what you see from your perspective is how your stories turn out. All my life, I was aware of racism. And in this situation, they killed a kid. They weren't there to help her. They weren't her friends. The Freedom Riders were not going to get through Alabama alive. And the Afro was, it was just an ideal place to work, making it up with their websites and other opportunities.
My name is George Curry. I'm editor of the National Newspaper Publishers Association News Service, which is a mouthful. And I'm so glad to be here today with one of my owls. And your name is?
I'm Moses J. Newson, and I'm a retired journalist.
Do you remember when you first became aware of racism?
All my life, I was aware of racism. It was just in that area, you know you didn't have the opportunities that others had. You didn't go to the same schools, you didn't use the libraries on Main Street, you didn't have jobs, that sort of thing. After a while, you just realize that's reality, and just hope that someday you would be in a position to try to help bring about change.
Tell me about that. Tell me about how you thought your life would be. Did you look beyond that, saying, I got to get out of here? Or what went through your mind?
I suppose there was an intent to go to college anyway. And when I was young, I would see copies of the Pittsburgh Courier, the Amsterdam News, or maybe the Norfolk Journal and Guide. And you see what these guys are doing and what they're writing and how different it is from what you're getting in, say, the Times Union or some other daily paper at that time. And it just occurs to you that maybe if you went into that field, you'd be able to make a contribution somehow to help bring about change, or at least record some of the things that people were trying to do to bring about change.
So you got a chance to go to Tri-State Defender now because of the relationship you already had.
Well, we put in applications, you
Okay.
know.
Mm-hmm.
No, I didn't know L. Alex Wilson at all.
Okay.
My wife knew about him.
Mm-hmm.
I found out about him later, you know. There was things you don't know about people, you know, sometimes until something happened, you know. And something happened one night at a place that we had stopped for him to pick up some stuff. And next thing I knew, man, some guy came running out behind him waving a pistol, you know.
Whoa.
I said, what the heck is going on here, you know? And I jumped out of the car, you know, hey, man, be cool. It's all right here. And that day down in Little Rock, when the mob attacked 4 of us, he wouldn't run. Man, he just walked along. They would climb on his back and they hit him with bricks, they kicked him in his stomach. They just hurling all kind of insults and all kind of stuff, you know, you pulling out credentials and stuff hanging around the neck. That didn't mean anything to them, man. So before we got up to Park Avenue, which ran across the front of the school, someone up front yelled that they're in our school. You know, they got in. And boy, the mob went crazy, man. They started attacking us, you know, like we was something good to eat, man. And Jimmy Hicks and I took a few licks, man, but we got away as best we could. L. Alex Wilson was left out there by himself, just walking, and wouldn't run. So he just walked along and took it, man. And it was a tough time out there.
As you can see, we got a lot more to talk about, so don't leave us. We'll be right here. Welcome back. Let's resume our conversation. Now, how long had you been with Tri-State Defender when you went to cover the Emmett Till trial?
I had been there, I guess, about three years.
All right, so what did you know when you first got the assignment?
Man, the first day of the trial, you walk up there and this sheriff meets you and tells you straight up, there would be no integration in this courtroom. I've got a press table set up over there for white folk, and you guys will sit out in the audience where you can, get yourselves a seat out there. And there wasn't any question about what was going to happen, you know. These guys sat up there, and it was sort of entertaining to see how they were so pretty much cocky sure that they were going to be set free, you know. Mm-hmm. And I think up until that time, the black media had been carrying the heaviest load on civil rights coverage and that sort of thing. This brought in a whole lot of people from the big press. But the moment I heard that he had said something to some white woman and he was missing, I went down immediately to Money, where I had a chance to shoot pictures around there. That was a place where you could drive through almost and miss it if you didn't look for it. And I went out to the home where Mose Wright lived, and man, they hadn't even made up the bed where the boy was sleeping at that time. I just took pictures of everything and talked to Mose Wright.
When you first interviewed Mose Wright and the people around Money, what were you making at the time? Because it's easy to look back later on. What did you make of it?
Just looking at him, he was a brave guy. Mm-hmm. And I think he felt in his heart that in some way he had let Emmett Till down because they came to his house to get Emmett Till. And I think he sort of felt a remorse about that.
But why do you think that case, through all the history, is just still, people still talk about it?
I think it was because we were at a point where a lot of demonstrations were taking place. An awful lot of people had become fed up with what was going on. Mm-hmm. And in this situation, they killed a kid. He got 14 years old, something like he just turned 14 years old. And they murdered him. And I think a lot of young people and other people decided that if they were going to be killing our kids that way, it was time to take a more forceful view of what was going on. You know, racism itself was bad enough, and people had been lynched on all kind of situations, that kind of stuff. But usually, it wasn't a kid who was supposed to have whistled at a white woman. And I just think that set off a whole lot of interest in what was going on, and it made a lot of young people upset. You saw the people later, who started sit-ins.
Don't go anywhere. We have a lot more discussion to have here today. I'm glad you're able to rejoin us for this interesting conversation. Tell me what Afro was like then when you first joined.
Oh man, the Afro was, it was just an ideal place to work. The family was into doing things. the family believed in covering colored people and their interests around the world. And we found all kind of ways to get stories done.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when they was having this stuff about Route 40, they wouldn't serve black people out there, but they would serve ambassadors from Africa because they were interested in putting on a good face at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Afro went out and rented some limousines and rented some garb that would be worn by African dignitaries and that sort of thing, and went out on Route 40, got served, and wrote a big story. It was a big story, you know, about the way the government would treat other people but not treat its own citizens.
That's a great story. Man, I'm listening to you talking that, and I'm listening to commitment that Afro had to news.
It was a paper that did a lot of things that a lot of people may not know about. But when I was with the Afro American, we had 13 editions.
13.
13 editions. We came out twice a week in Baltimore, twice a week in Washington. We had the national edition, went out early, the first paper out. Then we had office in Richmond, we had office in Newark, they had an office in Philadelphia, we had a New England edition, and we had North Carolina, South Carolina editions, of course, and we had one on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. So it was a big publication. It reached a lot of people.
How long had you been here when you was sent to Little Rock?
I had come up to the Afro and gone through tests that they give and covered some stories, did some writing and that sort of thing.
Did you feel a sense of duty, though, covering that?
Yeah, a sense of responsibility, getting that stuff in history from my community's point of view.
Describe for me what it was like seeing the hatred on the people's face there in Little Rock, the mobs.
It was just sort of devastating. This was 1957, and we considered that we had been making some progress. On that corner that I mentioned to you before, 16th and Park, I don't know if the lady lived there or not, or whether she was just up there on the occasion. But when we were up there, when the kids got into the school and the National Guard, the military troops had settled things down. Man, she was just up there wringing her hands and crying because they're in our school. And you could just see the hatred and disrespect for people. And it was all over the place. And the game was such that after the military took over, and a lot of the white kids were coming out of school, right there on that same corner, there were young white guys who had come out of the school. They were inspiring young white students who had come out, not to clear the sidewalks. It was a test for the military, and they knew that because, you know, they didn't figure nothing was going to happen to those young ladies, the young white ladies. And to my shock, his guy called the orders, man, and he wanted them to move. They wouldn't move. And, you know, he did this lower gun thing, firewood, hup, and they just started moving. A couple of girls got punched. You know, they made big stories out of it, you know, attacking the girls and all that kind of stuff. But they actually inspired that thing. They set that thing up. I'm right there watching them, you know. They set that kind of stuff up. And that's when I realized how damaging some of these stuff could be to young people. And it grew out of a situation while the kids were trying to get into school. For some reason, after Mrs. Bates had decided they would not go up one morning, one young lady didn't get the message. I think there was a telephone problem or something. And she goes up there. Her name was Elizabeth Eckford. She's all alone, and she tried to get through the National Guard people. One wouldn't let her through, so she tried another one. And that's when she realized they weren't there to help her. They weren't her friends. And she started walking back, trying to catch the bus out. And a group of people just sort of surrounded her and gave her an awful hard time, called her names and all that kind of stuff. And at one point, she said, I just didn't know people could be so cruel. And that was the lead on my story, and with the headline that ran across across the paper. I think people talk a lot about objectivity and that sort of thing, but sometimes it's what you see from your perspective and what you gain from certain things from your perspective that is how your stories turn out.
Please don't touch that dial. We have a lot more discussion ahead. Welcome back. Let's resume our conversation. Now let's talk about this Freedom Ride, because that was an exciting time for me. I was really following it, particularly when the bus came to Anniston.
Yeah. Freedom rides I had agreed to do. James Farmer was trying to get media people to go along on what was supposed to be a 2-week journey through the South to test whether or not the laws on desegregation, integrating buses was actually happening. What they did, we were on 2 different buses, Greyhound bus and a Trailsway bus. And they would go to these places, and certain people had been delegated to go in as an integrated team and sit in the black area, sit in the white area, and see what happened. And it went on that way. The further south we got, the tougher it was getting. So everywhere we stopped along the way, they would pick up additional people who would go along to test these places. In Atlanta, Martin Luther King Jr. and some of his people came over for the dinner. And King let the word out that he had heard that the Freedom Riders were not going to get through Alabama alive. I was on Greyhound that day, and Booker's team they were on the other bus. And on the way to Anniston, which was going to be our first big stop, a bus flagged us down, a bus that was meeting us, and told us there was a pretty nasty mob up in Anniston. And sure enough, when we got there, there was a pretty angry mob up there. They started trying to break out the windows of the bus. They were calling us all kind of names, the N-word, communists, all that kind of stuff. I thought, man, we're getting out of here. And I looked back, as far as you could see, there's a string of cars following us. In front of us, there was this little roadster car with a few people in it. And they were swinging from side to side to keep the bus driver from passing them. So what had happened, they had punctured the tires. Among the things they were doing there, they had punctured the tires on the bus. And by the time we got to the edge of the city limits there, the tires went down. And they were all around this place. You know, they were trying to break out the windows again and threatening us in every way they could, you know, come on out and integrate Alabama, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So eventually, we found out there were 2 state troopers on there on the bus. We didn't know about these guys. Mm-hmm. And one of the guys, L. Cowlin, I always remember this guy, he pulled his pistol and stood in the doorway so they couldn't get in to get to us. And I'm sitting in a seat by myself. And it's pretty rough when you're working with a camera around your neck out there. They sort of go for guys with cameras too. So I took my camera off and I stuck it beneath my seat. Mm-hmm. So eventually they broke through the window where I was sitting, and that's where they threw the bomb in, this fire thing that they had set up. And I got a few burns behind the ear and that sort of stuff, but nothing serious. But then, almost suddenly, this bus was almost filled with smoke, black smoke, dark smoke. Then it started getting hot on the bus, you know, it was time to get off, man. So I got off, and there was the worst scene you could ever see. People stumbling around, crawling around on the ground, trying to get the smoke out of their chest, and just gagging, and I don't know, you never think Americans would be doing that to fellow Americans. That was one phase of this thing. You would think that police, you get a guy who stands in the doorway to help you, and then there's another bus with other Freedom Riders on it that went into Birmingham. We had heard that the police commissioner and some others had made a deal with KKK and other mob people to stay away from the bus station for a certain length of time, 10 or 12 minutes, whatever it was. And they could do whatever they wanted with the Freedom Riders who were on the bus. And that's what happened, you know, and people always think that police, strictly police doing police work. But these police, all of them, stayed away from that train station while people were getting beat up. Stayed away from that bus station while people were getting beat up. And later, police chief said something to the effect that it was Mother's Day and a lot of the guys were off and that kind of nonsense. But, you know, everybody knew what they had done and it was reported.
As you can see, we got a lot more to talk about, so don't leave us. We'll be right here. I'm glad you're able to rejoin us for this interesting conversation. What are you concerned about the black press and where it's going and whether it'll be around?
The black press basically was not as well financed throughout its history as it might have been, could have been more effective with more financing. And I think now we have situations where some papers are still excelling. Some don't have the circulation that they once had, but in some way they are making it up with their websites and other opportunities. And I think the Afro has done a good job on that because John Oliver III, Jr. Was one of the early people to get into internet website business. Uh, it's sort of a hit and miss situation. Some of the papers not as influential as they once were. And there's a reason for that because a lot of the mainstream media are covering stuff that they once did not cover. But I think they're going to be around, and I think they're going to be in a position to bring some pressure at different points. You can't have a paper like the Afro-American painting a different picture on different issues when they are right, and have the bigger media ignore it completely, as they once did. Somebody has to say something about these things, and I think they do play a good role in that way also. But a lot of people still depend on those papers. And every week, I subscribe to the Afro, and every week I see something in there that I didn't see in the mainstream media. And I wouldn't be without my Afro in any circumstances.
When you look back at your other career, your career in journalism, how would you describe it?
I would say fulfilling to great degree. I got an opportunity to record some important history. I got an opportunity to support some people who were trying to make things better. I got an opportunity to challenge some people whose views didn't reflect the diversity and the need for diversity that we have in this country. So all in all, I thought it was a pretty decent career. I remember being down in Mississippi once, not too far from Money and those places down there, covering a voter registration thing. And this professor from Howard University was the guy who was in charge of a voter registration project at the time. And we were in this small church down there. And outside, there were all these KKK people and citizen council people shooting people's pictures as they went and all that kind of stuff. And, Farmer was there, and people from some of the other key organizations were there. So what was going on, people would get up and talk about the kind of problem they had registering and vote. They would sing songs, it was sort of like some of the old church services where people would get up and testify. And every once in a while, the city would run its fire trucks up and down outside with the bells clanging and all that sort of stuff. And eventually, this middle-aged guy got up, and he was telling people how he had got turned away when he tried to register and vote. And he had been living on a plantation there for, I guess, most of his life. And he was telling people now that his guy he had worked for all these years was telling him that he had to get off the plantation. He got no job, got a wife, children, nowhere to go. And in the end, he tells the people, don't worry about me. You guys just keep going down there and try to register to vote. And those kind of things you ran into out there, and they just encourage you to do what you were doing on behalf of people who were actually carrying the burden.
I want to thank you. I want to thank you because there are a whole lot of generations of people who follow you and admire you and appreciate what you've done.
Well, I want to thank you because I've watched your career, and you're one of those guys who tell it like it is and don't mind doing it.
It doesn't get any better than this. I am here with one of my idols, and I'll never forget this day.